Welcome to another installment of This Is Not Normal on the Political Drain podcast with Drill Sergeant Doug, aka Admin Doug, a U.S. Army veteran, teacher, musician, and family man from Jamaica, now fights for justice and democracy through commentary and humor. Follow him on YouTube at Political Drain and at Sons of Liberty Official as Drill Sergeant, aka Admin Doug, continues to protect our freedoms.
With the BBC facing an existential crisis, with Donald Trump still threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Sorry, $5 billion. Between $1 and $5 billion.
What's up, YouTube? Drill Sergeant here. And Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. He's more than likely a PDO file and someone who protects them, like Ghislaine Maxwell. So, lest any of this distract us from that point, I want to make sure we're not distracted. Now, the story. Today, we're traveling across the pond to talk about Trump suing the BBC for selectively editing his now famous January 6th speech.
With the BBC facing an existential crisis, with Donald Trump still threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Sorry, $5 billion. Between $1 and $5 billion. I want $6 trillion and Claudia Winkleman's hair. That's more intimidation than litigation. I guess he expects the BBC to fold like a piece of used bog roll, like CNN, CBS and ABC did. But the BBC won't settle, because it's our money. They can't, so they might go all the way. The BBC might very well win, but there'll be no BBC left by the time it does.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Yeah. Fine. There's a little bit of deceptive editing there that I don't think they meant to be deceptive. They just wanted to get to the point. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. But if you're a journalist and you're not drill sergeant who's out here just to make sure that I'm hurting the feelings of red hat wearers on purpose every day without care or fear of what they think, if that's not your purpose and you're an actual journalist, yeah, you probably need to be careful with that. On the other hand, the president trying to shake down news organizations isn't a new thing. The difference here is that the BBC is a public service broadcaster like PBS used to be, because they'll be gone soon if we don't get rid of this administration, but I digress. It's not a private corporation like other networks in the UK and America and NBC, ABC, that type of stuff, right? Just a little bit of history. It was set up in 1922 and was granted a royal charter in 1927 and operates independently of the government. The royal charter means that it has the right to exist, but not that the government can direct it or it's of the government in any way. It's for the public, publicly funded and only owned and operated by the public, not the government. That's important to know. Okay, now that that's out the way, here's a story. It all started when contents from an internal BBC board memo found its way onto the desk of the Daily Telegraph newspaper. And this report accused the BBC of bias in its reporting over Israel and was also highly critical of an edit made in the Panorama that's basically like an affiliate with the BBC. And that program was about the January 6th insurrection. Now, it's the latter. Not the Israel thing, the January 6th thing, right? That caused the resignation of the director general and the head of news. And then even later, a further board member resigned over the way everything has been handled since the story first broke in the Telegraph. Okay, now the BBC did make an apology, people, and I think rightly so. The author of the original BBC dossier, Michael Prescott, though, may himself have doctored Trump's quotes in the report to make his evidence seem more damning. James Ball, who's the political editor of the New World, reported this on James O'Brien LBC radio show, one that I love, by the way.
And of course, the whole centre of the row is whether Panorama misquoted Donald Trump. And they took a couple of little things he said in an hour-long speech and put them together. And the allegation is that they misleadingly suggested that Trump incited the January the 6th riots, which, of course, he incited. You know, congressional reports found this. Courts have found this. There are reams of evidence for this. But I went and read the quote as it was in this dossier produced by this external advisor, Michael Prescott. And the quote just sort of looked a little bit odd to me because I've read this speech and I just sort of thought, hey, I'll just look up where this is. And when I looked in the actual speech, the transcript's online. Anyone could have done this at any time, including the BBC.
I thought I had. This is why I should put my hands up and express a degree of embarrassment here, because I thought I had done it, and yet I missed what you're about to describe.
Yeah, and so Michael Prescott has him saying, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be with you. I know that everyone here will soon be marching to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make our voices heard. Now, Trump does say all of those words, but not in those order. And in between, he says things like, you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing. Now, those all sound like threats to me. Those all sound quite important things. But even if they weren't, this whole complaint is about altering quotes. And even in print, there are ways you show you've altered a quote. You put in an ellipsis, you break it up, This was said as exactly what Trump said. And so this bloody dossier that supposedly says that Panorama has done this mortal sin against broadcasting, that Trump's suing for $1 billion, has done something at least as bad, and I think arguably worse. And it took me to notice it. I actually...
Just for, hang on a minute, you've won a Pulitzer Prize in the past. Stop it with the self-deprecation, James Ball. You've won a Pulitzer Prize in the past. I'm less surprised than you are. But, I mean, to be clear... Address the bit about peacefully and patriotically, but the...
YouTube, the immediate fallout from the report is apparent. And if there's a, favorite pastime of the right-wing press in the UK, it's criticizing the BBC, just like the right wing here has a favorite pastime of criticizing Bert and Ernie, Big Bird, and Oscar the Grouch. And don't forget Snuffy. I love you, Snuffy. So, like I said, the problem that they have with this is the fact that it tries to be impartial and that it's publicly funded. And, well, press barons that have their own agendas tend to look down on that sort of thing, right? The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has raised questions about political appointees on the board of the BBC before. And those are her own words, that she does have those concerns. But I'm also going to let you hear something that she said in a radio interview over there. Check this out.
For Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, who joins us from Salford. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick.
Let's begin with the Trump letter, if we could, before we turn to wider issues. Was the BBC, in your view, right to both apologise and to refuse to pay any compensation?
Well, the BBC rightly guards its independence very fiercely, and so it's a question for the BBC board, the director and senior executives. But I can tell you that I've been working very closely with the BBC leadership. I've been speaking to the chairman and other senior leaders in the BBC daily over the last week, and I think they are treating this seriously. They have gripped it. They are right to apologise for what were serious mistakes, and they are right to have sought legal advice in order to respond robustly on that point. The most important thing that I think that they've done over the last week is to be very willing to own up to and apologise for serious mistakes that have been made.
There you go. So unlike Panorama, I'm giving you all sides here. You can't say I'm not thorough. But when I'm talking about the UK, I want to make sure I'm getting it right. The board member allegedly behind the resignation of both the Director General and the head of news was Robbie Gibb. Let's talk about him. He was appointed by Boris Johnson, the wannabe Trumpite back in the day. You remember him. And formerly worked for Theresa May and also the owner of the Jewish Chronicle. He said his mission was not to root out bias. He's also friends with the author of the report, Michael Prescott.
Shortly after the Daily Telegraph published the report, the BBC's Director General and Head of News resigned. And who was the driving force behind those resignations? According to newspaper reports, it was Robbie Gibb. Gibb claims to be on a mission to root out bias at the BBC. So who is this self-styled paragon of impartiality? He describes himself as a proper Thatcherite Conservative who once served as the Conservative Prime Minister, Theresa May's Downing Street Head of Communications. After that, he helped launch GB News, the TV channel whose presenters include Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg. Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson then appointed Gibb to the BBC board, where he took on a key role overseeing editorial standards. Conservative activist Robbie Gibb had a mission to root out bias. One newspaper quoted him as saying that if he didn't get his way, he would, quote, blow the place up. When Gibb was handed his role at the BBC, he had to fill in a form declaring his financial interests. In it, he wrote that he was the 100% owner of the Jewish Chronicle newspaper. The paper had just been bought by a consortium, but Gibb has never revealed who put up the money. So what happened when this figurehead of BBC impartiality took over at the Jewish Chronicle? The paper became a vocal supporter of the Netanyahu government and was plagued by ethical and editorial lapses, which led 5 leading columnists to resign. One of them, Jonathan Friedland, said, quote, "Too often the JC reads like a partisan, ideological instrument, its judgments political rather than journalistic." A reminder, Sir Robbie Gibb is now the arbiter of supposed BBC bias on Israel-Palestine. The internal report that started the recent controversy was written by a man called Michael Prescott, a former Rupert Murdoch employee who is reportedly a friend of Robbie Gibb.
Some MPs and BBC staff are now calling for Robbie Gibb to leave the BBC board. Obviously. Another board member resigned after the board itself made the Director General and Head of News resign, but they made the decision without all the board members being present. So now he's gone. The president is claiming defamation, people. But in the UK, you see, there's a time limit of 1 year for you to make that type of a case, right? That's the problem. That's the difference. So it has been reported that the case will be heard in Florida because the time limit in America is much longer. Aren't they lucky? Aren't they lucky? There's several issues with this, people. Come on now. The main one being that the program was for a UK audience only. It was never shown through BBC Studios, which shows BBC content outside of the UK. It wasn't. According to Florida law, it must have been shown within the jurisdiction. So even if you were able to watch BBC America in Florida, it was never shown there. If you live in America and have watched that Panorama program, then you've watched it illegally. You pirated it. You should be sued. I'm just playing. It was never meant for an international audience, is what I'm saying, y'all. The FCC is written to Panorama to clarify this. Now, let's get to the piece itself. The actual piece itself was presenterless. It didn't have anybody hosting it. It was a piece that followed Trump's loyalists for 2 years before the election, while Trump was facing many legal issues. It was trying to understand why some Americans were willing to give him a second chance. I find that question to be intriguing as well. Okay, now it has currently been taken down from the BBC iPlayer. Fine, I guess. There were no complaints made to the BBC after broadcast in the UK from any UK license payers, though. Everyone knows the BBC isn't perfect or without past controversy, but the irony here is that the newspapers and organizations criticizing them the loudest are UK newspapers that have paid millions themselves for phone hacking and others that employed Boris Johnson. Yeah, Prime Minister employed employed him, people, to publish lies about the EU. TV news networks owned by billionaires and politicians that sold the country to Brexit. These are the folks that have a problem with it. The people who pay BBC, publicly funded, remember, had nothing to say. So fine, you want to take it down? You want to apologize? I'm just saying, let's think about that. Not to mention, Trump was elected president after the show was broadcast, so it's questionable how much damage it did to his reputation. I would say none. He was elected, and he's president. Again. Even U.S. House committees have found the president at fault for what happened on January 6th due to the president's false election fraud claims. There was a vote for impeachment over January 6th. People died as a result of the actions of the mob. Trump pardoned those responsible for it. So the fact that a 1-hour program, right, broadcast in the UK is responsible for defaming the president's reputation is not only out of reach, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, preposterous. Everything that has ruined Donald Trump's reputation, he did by himself. It's almost like the president is trying to rewrite history, huh? I mean, with his billion-dollar lawsuits, he's expecting the same type of media sycophancy that he gets in the U.S. But thank God the BBC, hopefully not yet, will not capitulate. An apology may have been warranted, giving him any money at all. Admitting defamation. Nah. They're not ABC. And thank God for that. I mean, how many U.S. networks have settled lawsuits with him already? CNN, CBS, Paramount, ABC, right? The Wall Street Journal, News Corp. And this is just to name a few. Not so long ago, he even tried to get Jimmy Kimmel sacked. You remember that? And look how the media companies responsible reacted so quickly. Boom, gone. The media landscape that we live in is one that is rife with people who bend the knee to power and not hold it to account. And on both sides, there are questionable things. And everyone in America, especially, everyone in America has some sort of game to play. Impartiality is almost non-existent. So if you want to be in this resistance and be educated and be knowledgeable on what's really going on, I use Ground News. Ground News has very quickly become one of my most prized resources, my go-to even, because I get to find out what stories are not covered by the blind spot feature, which I love, but not just the blind spot feature. Any of the stories that I bring up, I can see what either side is saying about it. I can also see who's paying for those headlines. It tells me who owns the publication, which also lets me know who they're writing it for. Many times, none of that is for us. But understanding the context helps us understand the story. Ground News is absolutely one of, if not the best way to know that you've gotten every side of a story and that there's not enough spin in the world that could have you misinterpret it. So resistance, people, there has to be a separation between government and the press. That's why I use Ground News. Okay? The Trump administration has already gutted American public broadcasting, and now he's trying to do the same to the UK, and he's not even a citizen there. And quite frankly, if it ever did see a courtroom, the BBC should and could countersue. Because the president's press secretary said the BBC content was 100% fake news. And unlike the cucks over here who just let it go and keep reporting on this demented, cankled, 2 cans of spray tan Sam Mussolini of Mar-a-Lago, like he's just a regular guy and another president, they don't have to take that, huh? The fact remains, Donald Trump's speech on January 6th and his rhetoric before it caused an insurrection at the Capitol building. Judges, courtrooms, and impeachments have said so. Period. It happened. The world saw it, and no amount of pardons or attempted whitewashing of events can change it. Now, we're going to have to fight back in our own way. I really want to thank the writers in the writing room and the people who bring these type of stories from all the way from Canada to the UK and even Australia and Germany too. We've got people everywhere And I thank you guys for this writing, because it's important for us to know that we're not the only ones going through this maniac's ramblings, his late night cankled ramblings. Unfortunately, he's not just our weird, crazy uncle off his meds. He's a person in position of power. And we got to get him out of here. Tomorrow we fight.
What's up, YouTube? Right here normally is where I put in the call to action to help us fund the resistance, helping people move in the shadows so other people can do it in the light. And this time is a little different. We have a family member, guys, that normally the money that we get from Patreon goes to help others. As often and as much as we get, we do that. But very rarely do we give that to our own. And right now, one of our own is in dire need of some help. The insulin pump is gone. The insurance companies are fucking her over. And we're calling out to the people who we know, you guys, to maybe donate. Right here is a QR code that'll go directly to her. No one else will even see it. And we thank you for helping us hold up another family member as we keep fighting. We'll hold up the fight. We just ask this time, help her out. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads. It's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works. Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.
That was the Political Drain podcast, which can be heard on www.groovechillradio.com/political-drain and can be viewed on the Political Drain YouTube channel anytime. Once again, thank you for listening to Groove Chill as we resist fascism in any form, pursue democracy, peace, and love.